9 pairs of eyes bored into me like X-rays. The conference room instantly became suffocating, as if someone had sucked out all the air, turning the room into a hermetic capsule. The thin silk blouse, which I had ironed with maniacal diligence that morning, clung treacherously to my back from the piercing cold sweat. "Excuse me, what?" My voice sounded surprisingly even detached. Victoria Sterling, the CEO, leaned forward in her chair. Perfect fingers formed a sharp steeple under her chin, and a smile played on her lips, devoid of any warmth. "Your most humiliating experience at work," she repeated slowly, as if doubting my ability to understand not the meaning of the words, but their blatant audacity. "We believe it helps assess how candidates cope with vulnerability." I felt a familiar wave of heat rise up my neck. But it wasn't shame. It was rage. Pure, burning rage that I had been training for years, learning to restrain, locking away at the very bottom of my soul, until I had almost convinced myself that it was no longer there. I am Olivia Bennett, 34 years old, a software engineer with 12 years of experience. I create systems that probably affect your life much more often than you might imagine. The interview at Global Tech Solutions was going, I thought, smoothly. 3 rounds of grueling technical checks, a thorough review of my portfolio, and now, the final chord, a panel interview with the executive team and seasoned engineers themselves. 2 hours of my life that I would like to erase from my memory. "You know, I would prefer to discuss career advancement opportunities," I said with feigned caution. "I would be happy to talk about the challenges I have overcome, or the valuable lessons learned from mistakes, but..." Victoria, without listening to me, cut me off with a wave of her hand, as if brushing away a pesky fly. "At Global Tech Solutions, we value radical transparency and developed emotional intelligence above all else. This question helps us assess your compatibility with our corporate culture. Everyone at this table has already shared their story. It's a kind of trust exercise." The man to her right, Ethan, I think, nodded vigorously, demonstrating his support with his whole appearance. "For example, I told them how I once mistakenly sent financial forecasts to the entire company instead of sending them to the board of directors. I almost lost my job." He laughed, as if recalling a hilarious joke. But I was not in the mood for laughter. I knew perfectly well what it was like to be in such a situation. I had faced it before, felt this nasty stickiness on my skin. This ostentatious demonstration of vulnerability that those in power love to demand from those who are weaker. And how skillfully they mask it under corporate culture, trust, or any other hackneyed word from fashionable management books. "I appreciate your desire to get to know me better," I said, slowly and deliberately closing my portfolio, "but I respectfully decline to answer this question. I am convinced that an interview is a professional exchange focused on qualifications and mutual compatibility, not a farce designed to humiliate the applicant." A deathly silence hung in the room. Someone coughed nervously, breaking the ringing emptiness. Victoria's smile turned into a pathetic grimace. "Perhaps you misinterpreted our intentions." "No, I understand everything perfectly." I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the parquet floor with a nasty screech. "Thank you all for your time, but I'm afraid this position is not for me." I walked out, my heels, like little hammers, beating an angry rhythm on the marble floor, each strike an exclamation point, emphasizing my determination. My hands trembled treacherously only when I reached the safety of the elevator. 4 months without a job. 4 months. For 4 long months, my savings were slipping through my fingers like sand. For 4 endless months, I woke up at 3 in the morning, seeking salvation in endless job listings. For 4 months, I put on a fake smile during video interviews, while my stomach twisted into a tight knot of fear. I left Apex Industries after they ruthlessly cut 40% of the engineering department. Newbie, move over. The old song and dance of the tech industry. Now I was sitting in the car in the Global Tech Solutions parking lot, breathing deeply in and out, trying to calm the shaking. This job seemed perfect, a high position, decent pay, and, most importantly, a job that I really cared about. And what did I almost give up on? Pride? Principles? Dignity is an unaffordable luxury when there's only a week left to pay the rent. But I realized something about humiliation. It's like acid. Slowly but surely, it corrodes you from the inside, until there is only an empty shell left, resembling you, speaking in your voice, but no longer being you. For too many years, I had lived like a shadow of myself. Finally, I drove home, to my tiny apartment in a dilapidated building where the plumbing had a life of its own and the walls were as thin as paper. On the kitchen table, like a cruel reproach, lay the final bill for my student loan. 10 years had passed, and I still owed more than I had originally borrowed, such is the magic of capitalist interest. My phone beeped, announcing a message from my sister, Sophia Bennett. So, how did it go? I froze, staring at the screen, my fingers hesitant to touch the keyboard. What could I tell her? That I might have thrown away financial stability over a single question? That my principles might cost me the roof over my head? That I was both proud of myself and terrified by what I had done? Instead of replying, I opened my laptop and went to LinkedIn. For years, I hadn't posted anything personal there, only occasionally shared industry articles to maintain the illusion of professional activity that recruiters seemed to expect. Something inside me snapped. Perhaps it was the accumulated exhaustion. Perhaps it was the rage that had been simmering inside, finally erupting. Or maybe it was just that painful clarity when you realize the game is rigged, and the only way to win is to quit playing. I typed, today, during the final stage of an interview at a company I was so eager to join, the CEO demanded that I share the most humiliating experience from my work history in front of 9 team members. I politely declined, offering instead to talk about professional growth. But she insisted, stating that it was necessary to assess my compatibility with the corporate culture. I thanked everyone for their time and left. 4 months of job searching. I desperately need a job, but I refuse to participate in this charade where you're required to publicly display vulnerability under the guise of corporate culture. Humiliation is not a job requirement I'm willing to accept. And I added the hashtags, job search, interview, corporate culture. My heart was pounding, my finger hovering over the post button. One click, and my career could plummet into the abyss. In the tech world, everyone knows each other, HR directors share information. I'd be branded as difficult, stubborn, lacking corporate spirit. Summoning all my willpower, I clicked post. Immediately turning off notifications, I filled the bathtub with hot water and sank into it, trying to dissolve the tension. But, as we know, disabled notifications don't just disappear. Morning greeted me with an avalanche, over 5,000 likes and about 1,000 comments on the post. By noon, it had been shared by 3 influential figures in the tech world. By evening, it had blown up the industry. Most of the comments expressed support and understanding. People shared their own stories, about inappropriate interview questions, about violations of personal boundaries disguised as corporate culture, about microaggressions that had become the norm in American offices. But there were other voices too. Looks like someone couldn't handle a simple question, one sneered. That's why women don't succeed in tech. Too emotional, another echoed. She must be the life of the party. I swallowed each word like poison. And then a message arrived, from Abigail Hayes herself, VP of Engineering at Redwood Innovations, Global Tech Solutions' fiercest rival in the corporate arena. Your post resonated with me, she wrote. We're building a team that values professional boundaries and genuine respect. Would you be interested in discussing a senior system architect position? No humiliation, guaranteed. Skepticism was my first reaction. A cheap PR stunt? Or genuine interest? In the tech world, the line between the two is razor thin. But I needed a job, and Redwood had an impeccable reputation. Least of all, I expected to receive a call from Victoria Sterling herself that same day. Olivia, she purred into the phone when I answered. A voice of honey and blades, saccharine yet steely. I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I don't think so, I replied, feeling my heart race but trying to keep my tone even. You didn't mention our company in your post, she continued, as if she hadn't heard me, but people are drawing conclusions. This kind of scrutiny can damage your career as much as it damages our reputation, the voice in the receiver said, and I distinctly heard the threat veiled as concern. A typical tactic of someone used to manipulating the truth. "So, you want me to delete my post, Victoria?" I asked, unwilling to play cat and mouse. "I'm suggesting we discuss the situation, clarify what actually happened. I'm confident we can find a solution that satisfies both parties." "We're still interested in your candidacy," her voice dripped with feigned friendliness. I could barely suppress a sarcastic laugh. I almost fell for it. "Let me get this straight, you're offering me a job in exchange for deleting a post that doesn't even mention your company's name?" "I'm offering a dialogue," she repeated, but her tone betrayed her true intentions. "Thank you, but I've already accepted another offer," I blurted out, even though it was a lie. A lie that, to my surprise, sounded convincing. After hanging up, I immediately messaged Abigail from Redwood, begging for an urgent meeting. The interview at Redwood was different from anything I had experienced before. Only 3 people, Abigail, the CTO, and a lead engineer. The questions were precise, professional, and focused on my technical skills, problem-solving methods, and ability to work in a team. Towards the end, Abigail decided to be frank. "I'm sure you're wondering why we reached out to you." I nodded, appreciating her directness. "Partly, yes," I admitted. "Your post caught our attention, that's true. But we've been following talented specialists from Apex Industries since the layoffs. Your work on distributed systems architecture was impressive. The post just prompted us to act." The job offer came the next day. Senior Systems Architect, a salary 20% higher than at Global Tech Solutions, better benefits, and clear prospects for growth. I accepted without hesitation. But the story didn't end there because soon after I joined Redwood, strange things started happening at Global Tech Solutions. Sophia called me 3 weeks later. Her voice sounded subdued, even though she was speaking during her lunch break. "Have you heard what's going on over there? Remember I told you about that awful interview?" I shook my head. In recent days, I had been completely immersed in Redwood systems, trying to settle in, integrate into the new team, and find my place. "It's a complete mess," she exclaimed. 2 more people have shared their stories about the CEO, Victoria. And it's not just the humiliating interviews. They say she's been fostering a culture of fear for years. There's an internal investigation going on now. I instinctively opened Twitter and typed Victoria's name into the search bar. What I saw made my stomach churn. Former employees, as if a dam had burst, were pouring out their stories. Current employees, trembling with fear, confirmed every word. The board of directors suddenly saw the light and declared their deep concern and serious attention to all the allegations. My post, to be honest, didn't contain any names. It wasn't even specifically about Victoria. Just a fleeting description of the moment when I finally refused to tolerate the unacceptable. But it opened a door, and now a flood of truth was pouring through it. I felt complex, conflicting emotions. It's impossible to find the exact word to describe the feeling of watching someone's downfall begin, knowing that you played even a small part in it. A mixture of guilt, satisfaction, and some strange, bitter justice tormented me from within. Not satisfaction. No, it was something else. And not regret. Something more sinister, more human. That night, my LinkedIn came to life again. A message from Ethan. The same Ethan who awkwardly chuckled over his failed financial forecast. "I quit today," he wrote. "Seeing you walk out that day made me realize how much crap I was just accepting as normal. Thanks for having the courage I didn't." I stared at his words for a long time, my fingers frozen over the keys. What do you say to someone who just turned their career upside down? "You're welcome?" Sounds stupid. "I'm sorry?" Not right. I wasn't sorry. In the end, I typed, "It takes courage to leave. I wish you the best in whatever you decide to do next." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept seeing Victoria's face in my mind's eye, the moment I got up from the conference room table. A fleeting surprise, instantly frozen into something cold and calculating. I thought about all those who had answered her question about humiliation for years, tearing open old wounds just to prove their willingness to be vulnerable on command. How many souls had been broken before me? How many proud heads had bowed because survival was more important? Dawn brought a new wave of notifications, messages, revelations. Victoria, ex-project manager at Global Tech Solutions, forced me to present a quarterly report with a hoarse voice. I could barely whisper, and she yelled at the room, "That's what happens when you don't prepare." And I had pneumonia. Designer, quit 2 years ago. In my exit interview, she asked what my therapist considered my biggest professional shortcoming. I refused to answer, and she ordered HR to mark me down for resistance to constructive criticism. Former executive assistant. She forced me to publicly explain to the entire board of directors why I needed to leave early for my son's speech therapy sessions, and then implied that I was clearly not dedicated enough to my job. Story after story, each unique but with the same poisonous DNA. A person vested with power often abuses it, seeking to belittle others, keep them in constant fear, reminding them of the insignificance of their position. By the end of the week, the hashtag Global Tech Solutions toxic culture had skyrocketed into the trends of the tech industry like a rocket. The company's shares plummeted by 8%, as if struck down. The PR department released a hastily concocted statement about taking all allegations seriously and launching a comprehensive internal investigation. I watched the unfolding drama from my new desk in Redwood, immersed in learning the systems, getting to know my colleagues, and desperately trying not to think about the storm I had unwittingly stirred up. On Friday afternoon, Abigail perched on the edge of my desk, looking into my eyes with concern. "How are you?" "It's a little difficult to settle into a new place when you're at the epicenter of an industry scandal," I confessed, looking up from the monitor in surprise. "You saw it too?" She raised an eyebrow ironically. "Everyone saw it. You know, the tech industry has the memory of an elephant, and the gossip network is as developed as in a backwater high school." I couldn't help but laugh, despite the oppressive situation. "I'm okay. Or I will be okay," I added hopefully. "It's ridiculously absurd. I didn't set out to deprive anyone of their job or crash stock prices. I just didn't want to endure humiliation anymore." Abigail nodded understandingly. That's how real change begins. Not with loud statements, but with a quiet no said instead of the expected yes. She got up from the chair and added, "Rest up on the weekend. Clear your head. On Monday, all the problems will still be there, waiting to be solved." But clearing my head turned out to be an impossible task. On Saturday morning, I was awakened by an email from a TechWire journalist. He was asking for an interview regarding systemic problems in tech interviews and my role in exposing the toxic atmosphere at Global Tech Solutions. I tactfully declined. By noon, 3 more requests had arrived. Unable to bear it, I turned off my phone and escaped for a long walk in the park near my house. The autumn air was cool and invigorating. The leaves under my feet rustled as if whispering secrets. The world was living its usual Saturday life. Children were kicking a ball on the soccer field, laughing and rejoicing. Couples were strolling leisurely with their dogs, holding hands. By the pond, a group of elderly women were gracefully performing Tai Chi movements, their faces expressing peace and concentration. None of them had any idea about the existence of Global Tech Solutions, viral LinkedIn trends, or the raging drama in the tech sphere. I sat down on a bench and watched, mesmerized, as a squirrel, as if possessed, hid acorns, preparing for the harsh winter. Am I like her? Just as frantically stocking up on security, fearing impending need? Maybe that's why I can't get everything out of my head and just enjoy the new job, the new stage in life. Suddenly, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I had completely forgotten to turn it on. An unknown number. "Hello," I said, trying to remain calm. "Is this Olivia Bennett?" A female voice sounded, completely unfamiliar to me. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Eleanor Davidson. I am the chairwoman of the board of directors of Global Tech Solutions." the blood instantly froze in my veins. Instinctively, I wanted to hang up. I barely restrained myself. Ms. Bennet, first of all, I apologize for disturbing you on the weekend and for obtaining your number unofficially, Davidson continued, and there was steel in her voice. I was silent, holding my breath, waiting for her to continue. I would like to meet with you in person, if possible. We need to discuss some issues regarding recent events. It's not just about my LinkedIn post, and you know it perfectly well, she interrupted me, her voice filled with undisguised tension. I frantically weighed the pros and cons. Refuse and be tormented by guesses for the rest of my days? Agree and fall into a trap? Secretly record the conversation? Take a lawyer with me? When and where? I finally exhaled. Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning. The Ritz-Carlton downtown. I'll be waiting in the lobby. And she hung up, not giving me a chance to recover. The rest of Saturday was spent in a torturous back and forth of anxiety, righteous anger, and increasingly panicked calls from Sophia. They'll sue you, she kept repeating during our third conversation. Don't take a step without a lawyer. They can't sue for the truth, I countered, although the very thought made my stomach clench. I didn't even name them by name. Olivia, rich people don't need reasons to sue. It's enough to just get angry. In the end, I decided to meet with Eleanor. But only in a public place, and I'll definitely record the conversation on my phone. In California, the law requires both parties to consent to the recording, so I have to warn her. If she's against it, I'll just leave. Sunday morning greeted me with a gloomy sky and drizzling rain. I carefully selected my outfit, black trousers, a burgundy blouse, and a blazer that had served as my armor during countless interviews. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton impressed with its marble grandeur and understated luxury. Eleanor Davidson was impossible to miss. Around 60, with a silver bob and the impeccable posture of someone accustomed to power, she sat in the corner on plush armchairs, a teapot steaming on the table in front of her. Ms. Bennet, she said, rising to meet me and extending her hand. Her handshake was firm and dry. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm recording this conversation, I stated immediately, placing my phone on the table between us as if erecting a shield. She simply nodded, without the slightest surprise. May I offer you some tea? She asked, gesturing to the teapot. I nodded in response. She filled 2 cups, each movement precise and controlled. I'll be blunt, she said, returning the teapot to the table. The board of directors has decided to terminate your employment contract, effective immediately, Victoria Sterling. The words struck like a bolt from the blue. I had expected anything but this. Summoning all my willpower, I tried to maintain a composed expression. Concerns arising from the incident involving you prompted us to conduct a series of interviews with current and former employees. And what we discovered. She paused, as if choosing the most delicate words, caused us deep concern. The pattern of behavior uncovered is entirely inconsistent with our corporate values and could entail serious liability for the company. I understand, I managed to say, though my mind was reeling. Could this really be happening? And why deliver this news in person? We are planning a comprehensive overhaul of our HR policies, particularly in matters of recruitment and employee relations. She took a sip of tea, and the sound seemed deafening to me. And that brings me to the purpose of our meeting. So, this was it. Options flashed through my mind, a threat, a lawsuit, a non-disclosure agreement. We would like to offer you a position as a consultant for this program. I nearly spat my tea back into the cup. Excuse me? I managed to stammer, my eyes wide with astonishment. Your experience and knowledge would be invaluable in restructuring our corporate culture and HR practices. You know better than anyone what we are trying to fix. Who better to help us avoid repeating the same mistakes? The irony in her voice was so thick it felt like it was choking me. Let me get this straight. You, the company whose toxic culture was exposed thanks to my publication, want to hire me to help you fix that culture? Exactly. Not a shadow of a doubt, not a hint of embarrassment. And why, in your opinion, should I agree? My voice trembled with indignation. Because real change rarely comes from the outside. It requires people willing to dive in and not be afraid of challenges. She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. And because we are prepared to compensate you generously for your time and expertise. I couldn't help but laugh. The sound was sharp and abrupt, so much so that one of the hotel guests turned in our direction. You think it's all about the money? There was contempt in my voice. No, I think it's all about change. Real change. She opened her briefcase and took out a folder. Here is our proposal. Please review it. Consider it. Consult with a lawyer if you have one. There's no need for you to rush your response. I took the folder, not even glancing inside. And one more thing, she added, rising, signaling that our meeting had come to an end. Whatever decision you make, there will be no legal repercussions for your social media posts and everything that followed. It was Victoria's initiative, not the board's. I stood up as well, clutching the folder to my chest. Thank you for the tea, Ms. Reynolds. Just Eleanor, please. And thank you for coming, Eleanor. I'll consider your proposal. I didn't dare open the folder until I was home, curled up on the sofa with a glass of wine. A call from Sophia on speakerphone. $50,000 for 10 weeks of consulting, I read aloud. 2 meetings a week to analyze and reorganize their HR policies and labor relations. Oh my God. Sophia gasped. And that's on top of your job at Redwood. Yes, evenings and sometimes on weekends. Are you going to accept? I stared at the contract, feeling the doubts warring within me. I don't know. And I truly didn't. 2 desires battled within me, to grab this folder, throw it in the trash, and throw myself headfirst into my work at Redwood. But another part of me understood what a rare opportunity it was to change things for the better from the inside, to build something new and bright on the ashes left by Victoria. The next morning, I asked Abigail for a meeting. Global Tech Solutions offered me a consulting contract, I began, recounting the entire strange story in detail. I wanted to be honest with you before making a decision. Abigail listened without interruption, her fingers forming a steeple beneath her chin. It was the same gesture Victoria used, but in her rendition, it seemed completely different, devoid of arrogance and coldness. What do you want? She asked when I finished. I exhaled. I don't know, I confessed, feeling lost. Part of me is sure it's a trap. Another part hopes it's a chance to make life better for those who will work here after us. And the third thinks it's none of my business. She nodded, looking intently into my eyes. All these thoughts are valid, especially from Redwood's perspective. And I don't see any conflict of interest here. We have different target audiences. As long as it doesn't interfere with your ability to perform your tasks, I don't see any problems. I sighed heavily, feeling the weight of responsibility. What would you do in my place? She pondered for a moment, sparks of excitement dancing in her eyes. I would barge in there, turn everything upside down, squeeze every last drop out of them, and channel that money into funds supporting those who have suffered from workplace abuse. A mischievous smile flickered across her lips. But that's just me. 2 days later, I signed the contract with Eleanor, having negotiated some changes. My consulting term increased to 12 weeks instead of 10. I gained full access to all complaints filed with HR over the past 5 years and the right to veto any new hiring policies implemented based on my recommendations. To my utter amazement, they agreed to all the terms. The work turned out to be exhausting, unpleasant, and often deeply uncomfortable. I conducted dozens of interviews with employees, delved into dusty archives of personnel records spanning years, and attended endless meetings where executives who had covered up Victoria's antics for years suddenly transformed into ardent champions of change. But change was indeed breaking through, like sprouts pushing through asphalt, agonizingly slow, with setbacks and regressions, but with rare, bright flashes of hope. They permanently removed questions about cultural fit from applications, implemented clear, standardized interview protocols that prioritized skills and experience. Employees gained the ability to anonymously report issues plaguing them in the workplace. And diversity consultants were brought in to address the glaring homogeneity of senior management. When my contract term came to an end, Eleanor offered me to stay. I declined. The foundation has been laid, I told her during our farewell meeting, now it's all in your hands. 6 months later, I was promoted to chief architect at Redwood. On the very day Abigail shared this joyous news with me, she handed me a printout, a job posting for a UX designer at Global Tech Solutions. In the section dedicated to the interview process, it clearly stated a standardized, skills-based assessment and respectful treatment of candidates. "Looks like your work has paid off," she remarked with a smile. That evening, I finally decided to reply to Ethan. Ethan, whose message had been gathering dust in my inbox for an eternity. "How's life after Global Tech Solutions?" I typed, feeling my heart flutter with memories. His response arrived almost instantly. "Started my own consulting firm. Fewer projects, more flexible hours, and most importantly, no Sunday nightmares," he wrote. "How about you?" I smiled and typed, "I'm doing wonderfully." And it was the pure truth, albeit not perfect. Work is rarely perfect. But it had become better, different, transformed. Remember when I went to that interview at Global Tech Solutions? I was filled with rage, it was eating me up inside. And I came out of there a person who had finally refused to be depleted. That refusal, that simple but terrifying act, to stand up and leave, triggered a wave of change I couldn't have imagined. It changed Global Tech Solutions. It changed the lives of people I had never seen. But most importantly, it changed me. Next week, I'm speaking at the Women in Tech conference. I'll be talking about healthy boundaries in the workplace. The hall buzzed with overflowing emotions. In the Q&A session, a young woman, an engineer, timidly raised her hand. Genuine curiosity shone in her eyes. "Weren't you scared?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. "When you walked out of that disastrous interview, knowing what might happen, when everything fell apart, weren't you paralyzed by the potential consequences?" I paused for a moment, lost in memories, in that very abyss of fear and uncertainty. Yes, I finally exhaled, and the admission sounded like a revelation. I was incredibly scared. Paralyzingly scared. But in that struggle, I learned a vital lesson. Sometimes, the very thing that instills the greatest fear in us is the step we need to take. Not only for our own salvation but for those who will follow us. She nodded understandingly, her pen quickly gliding across the notepad, capturing every word. After the speech, when the wave of attention subsided, I automatically checked my phone. A LinkedIn notification popped up, a message from an unknown sender. I had an interview at Global Tech Solutions last week. They asked about my qualifications, approaches to solving complex problems, and my experience with distributed systems. It was surprisingly professional, respectful, and to the point. "I'm starting on Monday. I heard that you played a key role in changing their corporate culture." "Thank you." A warm, genuine smile touched the corners of my lips. I put my phone away, feeling a wave of satisfaction and hope spreading inside. Revenge doesn't always mean defeated enemies and gloating over their defeat. Sometimes, true, the most sophisticated revenge lies in creation, in building something beautiful and lasting on the ashes of pain left by offenders. Not just for yourself, quenching the thirst for justice, but for everyone who follows your path. Such revenge doesn't burn out the soul, leaving only emptiness. On the contrary, it fills you with inexhaustible energy, gives meaning and purpose, turning the past into a foundation for a bright future.